of our goals are to share the history, the evolution, and the key partnerships for our arts-based youth development and employment program called Willpower to Youth. It's an initiative that's almost 3 decades old now that we've been running through Los Angeles and replicated in different places around the country with support from really interesting partners. And once we share that, we'll be also giving you some of the program's values, our goals, the structure of this program, and a little bit of the content. And then we're going to hopefully leave a little bit of time for questions and answers at the end of this presentation. And I'm going to turn it over to Peter now, our teaching artist extraordinaire.
That's great. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, and I was thinking, before we get rolling, we're just going to, and we don't know how this will go. We're not going to take the time to introduce ourselves. Everybody on this call, all the names and squares I see on this Zoom screen, but I am going to throw a few questions at you. I promise this will be low-key, totally optional, and hopefully a tiny bit fun. But just to give you a little taste as we get rolling of the way we might begin some of the conversations that inform this program. So imagine yourself on day one of a youth employment program gathered with 20 to 30 other young people and a staff that maybe is in the range of about 10 folks or so. And picture a wall covered with butcher paper or craft paper, a bunch of colored markers on the floor or hanging around, ready for you to mark it up. And your name is on the left side of this giant piece of butcher paper on a long list of participants, staff and youth. Across the wall, there are different columns. Maybe it's the last movie you saw, or something you do for fun, or your favorite snack. But for right now, I'm going to ask you two questions. And Ben, if you wouldn't mind, next slide. First one, I'm going to ask you to put into chat in this, what we call our Quienes Somos activity, who are we, as we begin to get to know one another in week one of this 7-week program. In a word or two in chat, just throw into chat your first job, if you don't mind. And if folks are listening and able to do that, that's fabulous. And if not, that's okay too. There you go. We have a beautiful, we got Tim Hortons, we got some sewing. Fantastic. And Ben, moving on to the next slide, if you would. Bookstore helper, love it. Good grades, paid program, ABC Head Start, great. Next one, for those of you who are ready for your second question.
Thank you. Sorry.
There you go. Next time, second question for those of you who are ready. When you hear the word Shakespeare, what comes to mind? And you can be honest.
Brutally honest. Brutally honest.
Romeo and Juliet, right. A lot of us read it in 9th grade. Drama King, Hamlet, writer, for sure. Right? Fantastic. Drama King, I like that. English, assorted plays, all wonderful. Confusing. Thank you for that. Wonderful and confusing. We embrace both, right? And in fact, the fact that it is challenging text, it's a high mountain to climb. There are other high mountains in the world of literature, but Shakespeare's certainly one of them. And we embrace that as part of the impetus and the work of Shakespeare is to climb that mountain together and revel in the feelings we get at the end of 7 weeks when we've done it. So next slide, Ben, if you would. Thank you for throwing in those thoughts there. And I just want to say that personally, Ben is sitting in the Shakespeare Center office right now in front of the Shakespeare Center logo in downtown Los Angeles. I am a freelance theater artist broadcasting from home here. And I think between Ben and myself, we represent two important components of the staff of this program, Shakespeare Center staff as well as a cadre of teaching theater artists who work in this program as part of our professional work, as well as part of our love for young people and for the texts. I can say quite confidently that one of the most satisfying parts of this program for me is, as you see in this slide, the fact that as a working artist, as an arts practitioner, an arts worker myself, the fact that for a lot of folks in our program, not all, this is their first paycheck. It's very meaningful to me that your first paycheck, the first paycheck of this young woman in this photograph, came as an arts worker. Not that all of our young people are going to venture off into careers in the arts, but how great for me to feel that we're introducing young people to the fact that arts is work worth doing. It's work worth being paid for. It's work that people are paid for. And also I'll say that theater is a collaborative art form. Again, for me personally, what a great place for us to explore together how this workplace, again, a first workplace for so many of our folks, can exemplify or be a model for the rest of their lives about a few steps toward building the kind of workplace we all would like to have in terms of collaboration, communication, trust, and respect, especially between employers and employees and fellow employees. So next slide, Ben. I will just offer kind of some basic info before we go a little deeper. Willpower to Youth, just to be clear, is a 7-week youth development, employment, and empowerment program that hires young people ages 15 to 21 to produce and perform an adaptation of a Shakespeare play. An adaptation, we're using that word just to mean a new version that's kind of infused with our own thoughts, feelings, and writing, as well as Shakespeare's. Participants build literacy skills, educational resiliency, interpersonal communication skills, and they become more work ready while earning wages, of course, for their creative contributions to a youth-driven theatrical production. Thank you, Ben. And next slide. And again, just to kind of get the basics out of the way here. In week one of this program, shortly after we do our Kenosomos activity, we probably gather in a big circle with our new workers, our new Willpower to Youth community, and run them through some of the basic goals of their 7 weeks with us. And this is the big one. This is on every goal sheet from this point throughout the whole program. Of course, there are sub goals, daily goals, weekly goals, but the program goal is through dialogue, education, job training, and art, and we'll talk more about those 4 domains a little bit later. The goals are to promote self-respect, to develop mutual respect, and to build a diverse, inclusive community of artists dedicated to each other and to the task of producing an adaptation of a play by William Shakespeare. A diverse, inclusive community of artists dedicated to each other and the task at hand. So with that in mind, as I say, we'll dig more and a little bit deeper into how this all works, program structure and values, et cetera, a little bit later on. But I'm going to throw it back to Ben right now. I wasn't part of the birth of Willpower to Youth back in the 90s. I joined in the late 90s. So I'm going to pass it on to Ben to take us through kind of the origin story of where Willpower Youth came from.
Thank you, Peter. And Peter introduced himself as a freelance artist and just mentioned that he began with the Shakespeare Center in the late 1990s. And he has been dedicated, recurring, permanent part-time staff for nearly 30 years and has been a really core element of the development of the program. Although, as he said, he wasn't there at the very, very beginning. And everyone at Shakespeare Center is very grateful for Peter's ongoing contributions. The history of Willpower to Youth, the program grew out of the 1992 Rodney King uprisings in the city of Los Angeles. As you may or may not know, way back then, the city was really being torn apart. And the city leaders and foundation leaders all came together to figure out how to address so many systemic injustices and anger and all of the issues that fueled those uprisings and that unleashed the violence. And one segment of the community focused on the issues confronting young people. And they reached out to a series of organizations, ours included, because we were a community-based arts organization, and asked us what we could design or develop to engage young people in the communities that were being torn apart, to engage them and give them hope and belief in possibilities and the future. And we made a decision at that point, one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, and one of the only decisions I wouldn't say I would go back and redo if I had a chance. And that was, we decided to go into the communities and begin to ask the young people what they wanted, rather than prescribe any kind of solution. We went in open, without any clue of what young people would say, but we came to them and said, what do you want? What do you need to give you a sense of belief in yourself and the future, and that something good is around the corner? And without exception, all of the young people we talked to in very disparate communities said the same thing. They wanted a meaningful job. And we have a sort of hero in Los Angeles named Father Greg Boyle, a Jesuit priest who created Homeboy Industries. And he's very famous for a quote that he made, I think it was on 60 Minutes, where he said, "Nothing stops a bullet like a job." And so we sat down amongst ourselves after hearing what young people in these communities wanted were jobs. The other thing they said was they wanted teachers who really believed in them, were not babysitters, and were not contemptuous towards the students or authoritarian towards the students, but who really understood and heard and saw them for who they were. And so we got a group of teaching artists together who care deeply about art and about what they're teaching and about community. And we asked ourselves, what kind of job could we create that meets the needs of the young people? And then we responded to the city and the foundations with a proposal of a program called Willpower to Youth. And we talked to the city leaders, and interestingly enough, it was not the cultural affairs leaders from our different communities, from the county of Los Angeles or the city of Los Angeles or the state of California. We were not addressing requests from the arts communities or art supporters. We were really addressing interests from community development institutions that were funded by community development block grants. And our community development department, which has since been renamed Economic Workforce Development Department, had issued an RFP to support teens at risk. It was called the STARS RFP. And we went back to the city and said, okay, you want us to address the needs of these young people. We actually have gone out and talked to them. And what they want are jobs. And you have a summer youth employment program, and we would like to qualify our project for summer youth employment funding and support for staffing. And they said to us, with great disbelief, that you're an arts organization. What's the job that they're going to do? And I said, as Peter described, we will hire young people for 180 hours, 200 hours, and we will create an original adaptation of a Shakespeare play that they will learn to write, that they will learn to design and build, and they will learn to perform. And the city leaders' skepticism was not allayed. They were still very skeptical about what we were proposing, and to brush us off in a nice way, they gave us a 3-ring binder that was 3 inches thick and that contained the Secretary Commission on Achieving Necessary Skills chart. Don't know if you people are familiar with the scan skills because they were developed in the 1990s, but we built our program around these 88 skills, hard skills and soft skills, that the Department of Labor identified as necessary to help young people become work ready. And we sort of called the bluff of the city leaders because they thought they would hand us this giant binder and that we would disappear. But as resilient arts teachers and art makers, we took on the challenge. And I have to say, I believe this was when Excel spreadsheet was first introduced into the market. We might have been like Excel 1.0. And we created a matrix of skills, the 88 skills for scans, and across one axis and then across the other axis, we put all of the different activities that we imagined over 7 weeks we would engage young people with to write their own adaptation of a play, to design their own adaptation, to build it, and then to stand up on stage and perform it. And we aligned those with these different domains: resource management. How do you create a production calendar and stay on time? How much will the production cost? Excuse me, the budgeting. What materials do we need to build a production? Clothing for costumes, lights, scenery, paint, wood, nails, hammers. And how do we divide the people up? In Willpower, they self-select 7 different areas that they may be interested in. Then, information management, all of the ways that they talk together and use and share the resources and create the crews that are necessary to create an entire production. And then on the soft skills side, all of the social interactions. And we partnered with an organization called the National Conference of Christians and Jews. They have since left Los Angeles, but changed their name to the National Conference for Community and Justice. They're an organization that is set up to eliminate racism, bias, bigotry through dialogue. And they had a wonderful program called Brotherhood Sisterhood Camp, where they worked with young people and had an entire series of human relations and communications exercises that they would do at overnight camp over a 2-week period. And we had experts from NCCJ as a part of our team integrate about 60 hours of communication, workshops, and skills that helped young people better identify what they were thinking, what they were feeling, and better express themselves through those kinds of exercises built in with play production work. And so we attacked the hard skills and the soft skills. We went back to the city of Los Angeles and said, here's our matrix. We kind of blew them away. They were stunned and said, well, I guess we'll give you money for a pilot program. They wouldn't commit long term, but they really wanted to see what would come of giving us a shot at it. And so we hired a cohort of young people with summer youth employment funding. We had a small amount of money to pay staff, and we went forward. Here we are 30 years later, and ultimately the city actually gave us money to buy a building to continue this program. I'm going to go quickly through the core values that we developed. As we prepared, we asked ourselves and young people what was the most important things that we had to believe in to make this program work as we implemented it. And that first and foremost was that we believe that youth have the capacity to learn and be central actors, quote unquote, in their own development. And that was reflected in the very first decision where we went out and asked them, what do they want? You know, and that we believed that it was possible and still believe that it's possible for young people and adults to collaborate respectfully. And that we go into the program, go into each program, each cohort, every time we hire a group of young people, believing that they're trustworthy, that they're capable, and that they're competent. We know they're not peers age-wise, but we commit ourselves to the belief that they're our artistic colleagues, and that we know as artists and grown-ups who have gone through all of this that art making is transformational, and that there is merit, artistic merit, in the work of young people. We may not hold them to the standards of a Denzel Washington in the movie of Macbeth, but we have our own sets of standards that we promote as being artistically meritorious, and that young people are completely capable of creating art that is powerful, meaningful, communicative, and transformational, and that they need the support of caring adults to guide them, and that it is critical that adult and youth relationships are committed to transparency, and that they hold these ethics dear, and that they're truthful and honest, and that's a two-way street, and that we as adults can work effectively with young people, and that in doing so, it is critical that we recognize, acknowledge, and talk about the power dynamic and the difference that young people feel in relationship to adults, and adults feel in relationship to young people. And these core values underpin each of the interactions and every day of work that we conduct, that our staff and young people engage in. I'm going to turn that over now to Peter, and allow him to do a little bit of work with you about communication. Peter?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, that's a lot, and it's invigorating to read that list with you, Ben. I want to say a few words before we get into the slide with the 4 animals on it, which is going to lean very gently back on some of those brave individuals who threw a few words into chat earlier. If you're still with us and still up for it, thumbs up, thank you. If not, Ben, it's going to fall on you to throw something into chat. But it's I just want to say, so we want to take this moment to kind of now turn the corner from those core values into what something a little more concrete, but what actually happens over the course of the 7 weeks. So just some real basics, 20 to 30 youth in the age range Ben has already mentioned, working, showing up on day 1 at 9 a.m., work day till, again, this is over 30 years. We've tried pretty much every permutation. The program is constantly evolving and shifting based on resources and circumstances, even space. But generally speaking, it's a 6-hour workday with a half-hour lunch, and roughly 190 to 200 hours over the course of 7 weeks. These young people have come to us and gone through an application and a brief interview process. We've met them through a variety of threads and avenues. Sometimes the agencies we're partnering with have brought young people to us. Sometimes we're working with educators in theater, in English language arts, in other fields, in high schools around Los Angeles, who have come to know our program, who have come to have students who come back in September and say, I did this amazing thing this summer. So there's a certain amount of word of mouth that I think helps us in recruitment as well. Now we have siblings of former participants joining us, and we're old enough now that we've even had children of former participants who have been part of our program, which is kind of a very powerful moment to meet the daughter of somebody I worked with in 1999. Over the course of 7 weeks, everyone writes, everyone talks, everyone creates, everyone engages in conversation, and every day is built of a sort of mosaic of different kinds of activities. There's lots of small group work in the course of a given workday, of a typical workday. Small group work as well as full community work. The first weeks of the program, as I mentioned earlier, are really a lot about getting to know one another, getting to know this chosen play, whether we're working on Romeo and Juliet or Hamlet or Comedy of Errors or Henry IV, Part 1, whatever our chosen text is for that summer. That first week we'll read a cut of the play. In other words, not the whole 5-act, 3 to 4 hour reading of a Shakespeare play. We will have trimmed it down to something that can be read in, an hour to 90 minutes. And over the course of those 7 weeks, every youth is collaborating with experienced professional artists, mentor artists, who in acting, design, writing, movement. So working in big groups, working in small groups, and getting to know the play we're exploring together early on. Now, we spend a lot of time throughout the process also talking about and talking to one another about communication and about the community that we're building here together and what we can do individually and as a group to make this the kind of place where A, we can do our best work, and B, is the kind of workplace we want to have for the rest of our lives, right? How is this different from school? How is this different from maybe what you see in the movies about what it's like to have a job or what it's like to have a boss? Can we make this a place that is joyful and productive and respectful, and where every voice is essential? So real quickly right now, you're seeing these 4 animals in front of you. That's a tiger, that's a hawk, that's a rabbit, that's a turtle. So just think for a moment. Imagine, again, week 1 of program in a big room with black walls. Each of those animals is on a sign in one corner of the room. Tiger, hawk, turtle, rabbit. And this activity that I'm going to do in the next 2 minutes, we would probably take 45 minutes to an hour to do in a full group. So bear with me as I kind of fast forward here. But we would talk about what these animals bring to mind, right? What's the first thing that you think of when you think of tiger? What's the first thing you think of when you think of a hawk? And your hawk may be different from mine, right? I may think that a hawk is distant and never connects, whereas you may think of a hawk as aggressive and very, very on task, right? And very connected. Those claws very connected to their target or the subject of their gaze. Not distant at all. So we can explore difference even in that context. Oh, the way you think about a turtle is super different. I love turtles. I feel like a turtle sometimes. For you, turtles are slow and boring and are always hiding. Interesting. Beginning. So in chat right now, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Again, if folks are up for it, great. Pick one of these animals if you would. And if I were to ask you to identify the animal that best represents your communication style when you, in those early hours of the morning, when you first wake up, when you're getting rolling, early in the day, maybe before you've had your coffee, before whatever it is that gets your day moving. Just a couple of thoughts in chat, if you would. What is the animal that best represents your communication style first thing in the morning? Yeah, got a couple. We have some consistent professional turtles. I love it. So you would be invited. Oh, beautiful. Love it. I love the difference, right? It's all about the difference in the room. It's all about acknowledging and frankly celebrating the differences in the room. So in the actual practice of this activity, you turtles, I'd send you over to a corner to talk amongst yourselves, right? Have a conversation with your neighbor about why you made that choice, etc. Thank you. Thank you for all of those. So I'm going to move on real quickly. So tell me, what is picking one of these four animals? I draw you all back in the center of the room. Maybe we do a few more in that category. Maybe I ask you, okay, so it's a bunch of mostly teenagers in the room, and you don't have to answer this question, but what animal best represents your communication style with people who are older than you, with adults, right? Interesting conversation. But I draw you all back into the center, maybe throw another question at you right now. I'm going to throw this to you all. What communication style best represents you when you're stressed out? Or maybe when you're leading a Zoom seminar. Yeah, just a couple of words in chat. If it's the same, great, as you early morning self, or if it's different, let us know. But think about the animal that best represents you when you are stressed, when you got a lot on your plate. Yep. Zoom depends on mood, depends on how many Zooms you've already done that day, right? Rabbit, I think that's our first rabbit to appear. So Carolina, we might talk about that a little bit. We won't now, but we might talk about these choices, but I'm seeing an interesting new diversity of choices here. I might ask you, and this is a pivotal question in willpower, what animal best, and you don't have to do it now, but what animal best represents your communication style when you're learning something new for the first time? Learning something hard for the first time, right? When you're just beginning that process where expectations feel high and you don't know anything, or you feel like you don't, right? What does that look like? What does that communication style feel like to you? I'm going to move on to one. Yeah. Okay, great. See, there you go. And then we can have variety and conversation based on that, back and forth, out to the edges of the room, back in the center to talk as a community, back to our differences, and then back together in community. There's a physical ebb and flow, if you will, almost to this kind of programming that keeps it interesting, frankly, for me, as well as hopefully the young people we're working with. There's very little lecturing in the willpower program, although there is some as necessary when things have to be said. But I'm going to ask you, and we would ask, which animal represents you when you're most comfortable, when you're most chill, kicked back, when you're with your most beloved folks. But now, what animal best represents, and put this into chat, what animal best represents you when you disagree with someone? When you disagree with someone, which animal represents that? What is, yeah, we're talking about conflict here, right? Could be a tiger or a hawk, depending on the situation, right? And we may bring up some scenarios. We may bring up some specific what ifs. We may elicit those from the participants. It's like, so tell me about a moment when. Let's get those narratives going. Let's get that story starting to flow. Those stories of your lives and your experiences are going to inform our play. Believe it or not, although you may not believe it here on day 2 or 3 of the program, your stories, we're going to make a play that incorporates your stories to the extent that you're willing to share them. Thank you for all of those. And then last but not least, I'll say before I wrap up this section, we would ask young people to identify something very different, which is all the questions I've asked so far have been about you. Which animal best represents you in these different circumstances? Now I'm going to ask you to choose the animal that best represents the communication style you find most difficult to deal with. Which of these animals represents that kind of person, whatever that is to you, that makes you go, oi, here we go. I got to take a breath before this encounter, before this conversation. There you go. And it's different, right? For some people, it's turtle. They drive me insane, right? For some people, it's a lion. I feel backed up against a wall and I shut down. I don't know what to say. So acknowledging and honoring that difference again, we will use an activity like this to have small groups as the beginning of having small groups make lists of communication guidelines for this workplace. And we would take the time early in the process to develop really voluminous lists of stuff ranging from no chewing gum or no open-toed shoes to don't steal my stuff or some version of cultural sensitivity, however that comes up in the language of the young people we're working with, right? But we would assemble all of this feedback into lists of communication guidelines that we post on a big wall and we return to again and again over the coming 7 weeks. Typically, those lists include, greatest hits like respect, like patience, like honesty, like cultural awareness or sensitivity, like risk taking, like bravery, courage. And often they'll include guidelines that come from the youth around consent, around touching, around personal property, or around what it's like to work in groups, because they do this in school a lot, right? And it can be pretty painful. So anyway, this is the beginning of our development of communication guidelines, just a little taste of the work. We'll get more into some of the details as we proceed, but I'm going to hand it back to Ben to take us into our 4 domains that kind of inform every aspect of the program.
Thanks, Peter. I was just remembering as you were doing that, how in the beginning of the program, we didn't let the kids come in with pagers. And now we collect the cell phones as
Yes.
part of those guidelines. It's just, you're taking me back. Well, thanks. And yeah, so the 4 key learnings that we have landed on after these years of working on the program, and the program is committed to continuous quality improvement. And so staff actually meet after every day and sit around and talk about what went down, what could have been done better, what can we do differently next time. So there's a lot of self-reflection on staff's part as we move through these. And the communication that we want to model among the young people, staff models among itself. Um, so the first and probably the most important key learning is that I am a member of several communities, including this one. And I'm just going to do a quick tangent. Back in 2005, I think it was, Peter, we were invited to Howard University to keynote the launch of the White House's Helping America's Youth Initiative. And we brought a bunch of young people and they performed and we talked about what we did. And we had the heads of 7 federal agencies and 600 youth development experts at this. And we explained to the Department of Education, to the Secretary of the Attorney General, the Secretary of Labor, all of that, that the common measures that they are all looking for when they go into a program to measure how youth are progressing is really the same measure. Because what young people really want is to belong to a community. They want to belong. And what we're doing through the kind of communication exercises that Peter just described and all of the human relations work is we are creating that community for them. Or we're allowing them to create community amongst themselves and putting them in a sandbox, nurturing that kind of community development. So they may be part of their church community, they may be part of a sports team, they may be all different kinds of communities. We're creating at the moment, over the next 200 hours or so, an arts community. And to help them feel connected to that community is a key learning and a key value that we hold dear. And the way we do that is by providing caring adults who let them know that they're heard, they're seen, they're understood, they're respected, and that their voices matter. So, this community development piece of willpower to youth is the key learning, if you will. Then they all walk away. None of them come to the program, I can't say none, but very few come in hoping to become a professional artist. They come in because they need work. And in the course of the time they're with us, they learn that theater and making theater and all of the different elements and components that go together to collaborate in a community, in an ensemble, to create theater is valuable. And that they can be creative and they can contribute. And that's a learning that they can take into any workplace environment. Um, they may not have particularly thought of themselves as being creative before or contributing to a creative community. But by the end of the day, they have all been put in a situation where they have been heard and their contributions have been validated. Being a good worker involves knowledge, attitudes, skills that I can learn. So you don't have to be born a great artist to create art. You can learn the skills and have a knowledge base and manage your own attitude so that you can contribute and be part of a community. And that by committing oneself to do this, you will be engaged in a learning process and you will be changed by that process. So those are the 4 key learnings that we hope occur within the course of our program. And those learnings occur over 4 domains: human relations, artistic, workplace, and academic. The human relations, you've got a taste of it. Artistic, we have standards, artistic standards that we hold young people to, high standards for interpreting Shakespeare, understanding Shakespeare, making choices about Shakespeare. They develop a conceptual approach to the plays that they're doing. They write the text with a writing mentor. We have very rigorous workplace environment regulations. They sign contracts. They make agreements to behave in a pro-social kind of contributory way that we make them agree to beforehand. And by developing the literacies that they do in working with Shakespeare's language, there is certainly a lot of academic resiliency skills. We've had young people go back to school and teach their English teachers about Hamlet. And we have teachers calling us saying, "What did you do with my kids? They know more about the plays than we know." So those are the 4 basic domains under which all of those scan skills and activities, communications work, all of that kind of falls within these domains. And we do this because a lot of people think that the arts are kind of flaky and that there isn't any kind of rigor or structure to a workplace environment. But we define these, so as we talk to other who are in workforce development, they understand our approach does have structure and rigor. Um, and I'm going to turn it now back over to Peter, and he can talk about very specific or broadly, however you want, Peter, about the different domains.
Great, thanks, Ben. And yeah, I'll just take a few minutes, and this is kind of the next layer down. It's essentially building on what Ben just shared about the 4 domains and taking a slightly deeper dive and translating them into the ways we use our time, the ways these play out in a work day. Because I would say that every typical work day is going to involve a touch on each of these 4 domains. And of course, they're all connected. They don't exist, in isolation. Human relations, we use as sort of the communication stuff, really. It's that community building, those community building activities, and each of these domains, each of these outcomes involve particular knowledge points and particular skills that we're building. I won't take you through all of them, These decks and these points will certainly be available later if you're interested in reading them. But this is the realm in which we talk about stereotypes and biases. And I would say, Ben, mentioned multiple community identities that we're embracing and acknowledging in our youth. And those can involve very intimate and essential core identities, which include race, ethnicity, neighborhood, which include gender identity, and some of the things that present real difference in any environment, certainly a workplace environment, and real opportunities for mutual understanding. So, in terms of skills we can build around those topics, I am aware that stereotypes can be hurtful and know how to challenge them. I can even define the word stereotype. I know what it is, and I know where it leads. And human relations, this kind of dialogic component occurs every day. We check in with feeling words. We talk about big feelings a lot when things get stressful, or when people get angry, or when people get scared. That's okay. That's valuable. We have consistent dialogue groups that meet several times a week, whereby with the same group of young people and a facilitator, you're gathering to talk about how things are going in a smaller context. So it's not you talking to the big group. Some people are more comfortable in smaller conversations. Next slide, Ben. The artistic components that we cover over the course of 7 weeks. If I had to say early on, we're spending more time in the community building stuff and in those conversations. And as the weeks go on, we're spending more time in rehearsal. We have a deadline. We have an opening night, if you will, or an opening day. We have rehearsals at which we need to have props ready. We need to have costume pieces ready. We need to have scenic elements ready. We need that sound design to be ready to go and for us to hear and incorporate. We need the dances to be not only choreographed, but also rehearsed and practiced. That stuff takes time. That stuff takes more time as the process goes on, so that by week 6 and certainly week 7, pretty much the whole workday is a combination of rehearsal and small group work on the tasks in with individual mentor artists that remain to be done to get us to our goals. But some of the knowledge points here, as an actor, my body and voice are tools to create a character. We do insist that everybody act. It's not in everybody's comfort zone, and that's okay. We don't insist that everybody play Hamlet. We acknowledge and respond to youth preferences in terms of a smaller role, a medium role, or a larger role. But I would say one of the great joys of the program is watching someone who came in, as Ben mentioned, someone might come in only for the paycheck, and watch them evolve into someone who has just performed in a play for the first time and has achieved that bucket list thing that so many of us look back on fondly. I'm pretty sure it's a fond experience for the vast majority of folks who come through this program. But it's not only physical acting stuff, it's also, I can retell the plot of this play. I know how to read a play, right? I know the difference between stage direction and a character name. I know, so moving on, Ben, to the next slide that I'll just, I will read it fully because of this moment and this opportunity to speak with you all with the focus on workplace topics. Being a good worker involves knowledge, attitude, and skills that I can learn. The knowledge points being my coworkers are counting on me to fulfill my responsibilities as a member of this community. Work can be difficult, dull, and delightful. My positive attitude can help me appreciate the importance of the moment. There is great satisfaction in collaboration and completion. And these are checkpoints that, again, we offer production meetings, small group meetings, beginning of day, end of day checkouts, one-on-ones. We do workplace evaluations over the course of the 7 weeks. At least one, if not more, one-on-one between a young person and a staff member to check in with how it's going for them, to check in with what we're observing their growth and possibilities are, and offering some potential areas that they might want to venture into should they choose should they be seeking growth and new challenges. If we think they've got some good stuff going on, what's next? What can you conquer in this 7 weeks that maybe you as a new goal for you? Skills, I strive to be present mentally, physically, emotionally, to follow directions, be on time, complete my part as a member of this community, to carry a pencil with you as an actor, right? There is some just basic workplace, you need tools. What are your tools to do your job? And what do you need to do in order to be successful? I pull through the work hours with humor and good grace. Is there a way for you to acknowledge where you're at as you begin this workday, if it's not so positive, and move through that to get to a place where you can be a positive, contributive member of this community, and maybe save, return to those challenges and those feelings during lunch or after the workday is over. But more than anything, I work well with others. I ask questions when I need to, and I follow through on my commitments. That stuff we see, that stuff is lived, right? In a rehearsal process, any kind of creative collaboration. Those values and those skills are lived and developed in real time through real work. And last slide here, Ben, on these topics, which are just the academic threads that are woven through. Again, every day, part of the reason why everybody acts is that means everybody's speaking some words written 400 years ago, which means that you have looked up the words you don't know in some standard tools of the actor's trade, which might be anything from a dictionary to a Shakespearean lexicon, those intimidating 2-volume works that define literally every word that Shakespeare ever used in the context in which it was used, believe it or not. That the academic skills are not just understanding this old language, but also linking these old thoughts, these old characters, these old situations or situations that were written so long ago, and finding out why or how they concern us today. What are the connections between the characters in Henry IV, Part 1, and the way I am working through with my parents right now to gain more independence? The way I'm working with an adult in my life who may have certain life challenges that makes them less available to me than at sometimes than others. How can reading a difficult play pay off in new understandings and questions about the world, not only intellectually, but also writing about that stuff? And I'll say that writing skill is one of those academic standards that we do consistently. We journal several times a week, and ultimately the text of the play we perform is informed by those writings. Obviously, knowing something about Shakespearean context, Shakespeare's plays, Shakespeare's life is part of what we get, and the use of all these materials and the standard tools of an actor's trade, of an artist's trade, theater artist trade. So that's some of the stuff, that's some of the ways we use our time leading to opening night, probably 3 performances for an invited audience of family, friends, community, sometimes teachers, sometimes fellow students, sometimes student groups. But that's the culmination of week 7, and then our closure and our goodbyes. I want to hand it over to Ben now, and we know that we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. If any of this is sparking threads you'd like to bring up again, great, hold on to them. But Ben, I'm going to pass it back to you to touch base on key partnerships that have evolved since the founding of the program.
Thank you, Peter. We couldn't do this in a vacuum. And it took some imagination, although resistance from the Economic Workforce Development Department of the City of Los Angeles initially, to join forces with us and really take a deep look at the power of art as a work experience. And as you've heard today, this morning or afternoon, as a transformational personal development process. So our first and foremost partnership is with the City of Los Angeles and their Economic Workforce Development. They do allocate workforce investment funds to us through a contract that includes wages for young people and a very little bit of money for staffing. We have worked with the City of Los Angeles Unified School District. They have a linked learning division for young people who are not particularly interested in going to college but want to enter the workforce. Um, they send young people who are interested in the entertainment industry to join our programs, and they're referred to us through magnet and linked learning programs at different high schools. As I mentioned, New Ways to Work and Robert Sines is a great capacity builder for us. Um, the Archdiocese in Los Angeles has a huge youth employment services nonprofit organization that recruits many thousands of youth, and we subcontract our services to them. On a national front, what was really interesting was the Department of Justice's Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. They took a look at our program and really found it had a lot of positive impact as an intervention in gang reduction communities, and actually contracted us to replicate in Richmond, Virginia at one point. And you wonder, how does this intervention really work? Well, at one point, I don't know if you were working on that program, Peter, when we had ABC News making a little documentary on the Willpower to Youth program for a series of news broadcasts. We had cameras in the room at one point, and a young man came in really distraught, and in the sharing session at the top of the day said that his brother had been jumped by a gang member and was in the hospital. And if he didn't have this job to come to, he would have killed the guy who jumped him, that he knew who he was. And it wasn't a metaphorical kill. So it's that kind of program at a time of day and in a time of year that makes for a very effective intervention as well. And we were grateful that the Department of Justice recognized that. The National Endowment for the Arts, of course, recognizes the merit of the artistic immersion that young people are put through with this program. Department of Education has just issued a very large grant to us over 5 years to help us figure out how to take some of the key learnings and the community building that we've done and put it into high school curriculum so that kids, when they walk into a classroom, are not feeling like they're in a classroom, but that their class is a community where these values and these kinds of exercises can take place. So these partnerships then, after receiving the kind of good housekeeping seal from these larger government agencies, finally came to the attention of the California Arts Council and the Department of Cultural Affairs. All of the arts agencies came after in a very funny way. They didn't recognize us as an arts program for quite some time. We were really a basically workforce and personal development program. But as time goes by, and as people at these agencies understand the power of the arts to transform communities and individuals, they jump on board and become partners of ours as well. I'm going to just take you through a few photos that Peter can describe a little bit.
Great. Yeah, we thought it'd be fun to sort of wrap up, move toward closure here and move toward a few questions if you have them, with some pictures, right? Pictures are fun. And these are from 2018. We did a Willpower summer of 2019, and just to acknowledge the COVID pivot, that has happened. We have other programming that we of arts-based youth employment that we have done but we have not done a live summer 7-week in-person Willpower to Youth program since 2019. And we are looking forward to, we need building new staff and bringing staff community back together and planning and looking at what we want to do next time we get this program on stage live. This was a production of Henry IV, Part 1, an adaptation created with this community of youth and mentor artists. And next slide, Ben. It was as Ben mentioned, youth come up with their own concept for the play. So this historical drama, the youth had created a kind of futuristic world of warfare and family. Next slide. All of these design choices are makeup and clothing, elements sewn together by the young people themselves. Next slide. And I think this slide best represents sort of a core chorus, if you will, of storytellers. Sometimes we weave through youth leadership. There's always folks who have done the program before involved in any iteration of Willpower to Youth. So it's not all newcomers. Some folks have been through this before, and we call them youth leaders, and they have a different level of responsibility over the course of the summer. They lead games, they lead check-ins, they co-facilitate with mentor artists. But oftentimes it's our youth leaders who drive the original text, the new text portion of the play. The newcomers are doing the Shakespeare, and the youth leaders oftentimes are the ones who are giving voice to the community text, the community words, the thoughts and feelings that folks have written. Next slide. And that's part of a curtain call, taking our bows. And then last slide, Ben. This is an important moment I wanted to highlight, which is just our colleague John Royal here leading a post-show conversation with our audience. The experience doesn't end with the curtain, not that there's a curtain here, but the metaphorical curtain coming down. A critical moment here is the play is over, the applause has happened, the bows have been taken, youth come back out on stage, have a seat, and our audience stays for a conversation about what they've just witnessed. They have questions for the young people they've just seen perform. They have questions about what they've heard, the stories they've heard. They have questions about the process, about what it was like to pull this off. And for me, this is the moment where a critical set of transformations can happen, whereby community and friends, and especially family, and especially parent and grandparent generations can see a young person in a completely new light. I've never heard them speak so loud in my life. I've never heard him be so confidently or passionately express an emotion, or it's been a few years, right? I've never seen her move so quickly, right? I didn't know he was so funny, right? There are new insights into all of us emerge when we do a play together. And sometimes this is the moment where we see stuff that we haven't seen before. And we know those conversations continue in the car ride home, and hopefully in every workplace challenge. It's rare, right, where parents get invited into the workplace. It's rare where that generation gets to come in and sample and see what my young person has been working on and working toward, and who they've been doing it with. And I feel like that's a key component of the program that I love. And there's always a really joyful moment. And so that is that. And I think we have one more slide, Ben, of a couple of young people speaking in a post-show Q&A. But that's it for kind of our formal presentation. Unless, Ben, you have anything, other threads you want to kind of tie together or wrap up, I'll let you take us and invite some questions if folks have them in chat, or I think we can keep it casual. You're welcome to speak up too and turn your mic on if we're a small enough group that works for us as well.
Just wanted to say before we go into Q&A, we do have a training manual and program manual. The training manual is for staff when we do trainings, and the program manual describes what we do and why we do it in a more in a broader sense. I don't recommend reading these and then trying them on your own. They could be very dangerous. So we recognize that don't try these at home by yourself. We have artists and trainers that can help you. figure this all out. But we're happy to share these with you at no cost. Just we would hope that you would call on us to help you if you have interest in any particular part of it or the program as a whole. So let's do questions and answers. We have a few minutes. That was great, Peter. Thank you so much. Um, we have 7 minutes to entertain conversations, and if you don't have questions, I'm afraid Peter will make you go back to the animal slide and ask me more questions about.
Yeah, here we go. We got one. What does a student-led adaptation of a Shakespearean play look like? What kind of changes do the plays undergo? I can take that one. Great question. So we start with a cut. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that staff, there's a leadership staff that is meeting months in advance of the 7-week program, right? There's obviously hiring and paperwork and stuff to be done, but there's also artistic work to be done. We have chosen a play that we feel like or have experienced as relevant and resonant and a good match with the young folks in our program. It starts with we do a cut of the play, which reduces the Shakespeare play down to probably an hour of running time, an hour of Shakespeare text. How can we tell the whole story with fewer words? Okay, so that's what the adaptation starts with less Shakespeare, so that we can add student voice. So in terms of what the adaptation looks like, often, and we're artists, we've done pretty much every permutation of this idea over the past 30 years because it's fun to experiment, fun to try stuff. But we have done everything. I think in the early days, we weren't adding student voice at all, right? We were doing a cut of a Shakespeare play. And this idea of at times stopping the action of the Shakespeare play and inserting a scene or inserting a monologue or inserting a movement piece or a new song that somehow references or illuminates an aspect of this play in a contemporary way for our audience. Also, we found Shakespeare's really hard for audiences to, if you don't go see Shakespeare plays regularly, it can be a challenge to hear the words of Shakespeare, understand exactly what's being said. These breaks, these pauses where we maybe freeze the action of the Shakespeare play and an explanatory or illuminating scene comes up involving that chorus of storytellers or a chorus of some sort, can be an opportunity for us to help the audience link the contemporary world to the action of the play. We can have characters say, wait, I don't get it. What's going on? Wait, what countries are we talking about here? Wait, who's at war? Who's winning? Who lost? Who died? Right? All these questions are questions we can answer in the contemporary text, as well as illuminate why this play has become important to us. These contemporary characters can say stuff about, I'm thinking a lot about my life because of the way this character in Shakespeare's play handles theirs. So we end up with about a 90-minute intermissionless experience that goes back and forth between Shakespeare and new text, and that is often set in a different historical period, and that's infused with music and sound and movement created by the youth themselves.
And I'll also just add, we typically would have one performance where you would look into the audience and a lot of the people are wearing headphones, and we have a translation into Spanish for the parents of a lot of the kids who are participating in the program. So the play on stage, as Peter described, and the audience, we also take into consideration what we need to do so that audience members can understand what's going on.
Any last?
Wow.
Go for it, Ben.
No, any other questions?
Yeah. Any last or comments or thoughts? Do you record in these productions and are available to see them for context?
we have recordings? We do.
Well,
There is a video, an 18-minute documentary that the National Endowment for the Arts made that's on YouTube called Why Shakespeare, that has a little bit of the work that we do peppered into it. And we do record things. I don't think we posted.
Yeah, I think for theater artists, recorded productions can sometimes not be the most satisfying way of communicating the experience of what it's like to be in the room. But we are documented. We can share images. We can share for folks who really want to do a deeper dive, text samples of what it might look like to go back and forth between student writing and Shakespeare in a way that really presents student writing as equivalent and as important as these words written 400 years ago. So Ben, we have your email address. We're going to look at you as the person we communicate with. Should we want to take a deeper dive here or continue on this journey?
I can put it in
And
the chat. I'll just put my email address
perfect.
in the chat.
But looking at 1 minute before the clock strikes 3 East Coast time, there you go. I guess I will say on behalf of both of us, we're really grateful for you spending time with us this afternoon, and of course grateful for this invitation to share across the miles about this particular work. Love how your organization is keeping Shakespeare alive in young people's hearts. Thank you. Keep doing the great work. Well, back to all of you as well. Our gratitude to the work that you all are doing and to the whole reason for this gathering. So till next time.
Thank you so much, folks. We really appreciate you. As a former theater kid who got to be involved in King Henry V way back in high school, this has been great for my soul. So thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
Folks, you are dismissed from this webinar. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Jordan, can you
Yes, sir.
send us a copy of it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it will take a few minutes to render, and once it's available, I've got your emails, so I will forward that right off.
Great.
Have a great rest of your day, folks.
Thank you, Jordan, and thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.